folks in the room know Jake's father, Tom, and so one question is, did you ever feel pressure to kind of follow in his footsteps to enter into this profession when you were growing up?
No, I mean, I've always been around. I mean, I knew what to call it. I knew to call it a casket instead of a coffin at an early age. So, being from Batesville, Indiana, it's just something that you end up being around. So he never pressured me in it. In fact, when I graduated college, I tried to get sales positions and work at banks. That was his first thing, working in the bank, and nobody wanted to hire me. So I went and did accounting at his firm, Prime Succession, until I could find what I wanted to do. And as luck or not, or unfortunate circumstances would be, he sold his company and his partners went and started Keystone Group. One of them's here, and I went to work for Bob and his team. And that was kind of the start of my career.
Excellent, excellent. Funeral service is a family business, obviously, and you talk in your book in some great detail how it can be tough for an owner sometimes to realize while they may have a family member who wants to continue their legacy, they're not always maybe necessarily the right person to kind of run the show, so to speak. How long did it take for you to prove to your dad that you're truly the right person to be running JCG?
Let's see, so a couple of years, but I think the big thing for me was, and I learned it at Keystone too, where you transition from an 8 to 5 job where you go home and you don't have to worry about things to knowing that you're responsible for things, and then taking that learning experience over to Palm and then coming to work for Dad. And I think the thing that I got kind of out of touch with was the financial analysis, so I dug back into that. And as soon as I could get up and talk to the bankers that would come see us and the big customers that wanted to sell the business, as soon as he could see that I was handling that, then we did that transition, and that was in 2005 or 6, somewhere around there. Yeah.
That's right. And a small factoid, I'm going off script for a second. One of your first deals was in Ventura, California.
Yeah, this is weird.
And I walked into the funeral home because it was an independent firm being sold to SCI, and re-met Jake back in 05, and yeah, that was quite fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, a few years. What advice do you have for anyone that's transferring ownership to the next generation, whether from parent to child or anything like that?
Well, we learn a lot from what we do in transfers, and when we see successful transfers to the next generation, and then when they say, no, we're just going to sell to the highest bidder. I think the best advice is certainly start with a valuation, and this is just the truth. I mean, you start with a valuation, kind of see what the value of the company is, and determine for yourself as an owner whether or not what you're going to be transferring is going to allow you to enjoy life and everything that you put together, and grow that business. But the next thing is, if it ends up being that, then do you have capable key employees or family members in that organization? And hopefully, if you do, you've also done a good job of giving them the ability to kind of learn and train them. And my father was very good at that, actually. He really is. And because the other thing that happens is you might know that they're ready and train them and hand them the reins, but then you keep micromanaging them because you feel like you're still around, and he really stays out of the way. He offers the guidance, but he lets me do my job. So I'm fortunate for that.
Yeah, definitely. And speaking of transfer of ownership between generations and such, certainly, in your book you touch on the shortage of staff in the profession, right? And there's so many states that have some pretty tough legislation as it relates to getting licensed and such. Do you think it's time for the states to maybe change that, or what do you think is the biggest hurdle there with finding great people to join your team?
Well, I think there's a couple things that come to mind. I remember meeting with Dad, and we went down to Houston and met Bob Waltrip, who kind of started this whole consolidation of funeral homes in our space. And I don't know what context the discussion moved on to him saying, in the funeral profession, a lot of the funeral owners are the ones that kind of circle the wagons when the Indians are coming, and then they shoot inward. And okay. So I think the one thing is that we need, getting together, and I think this it kind of has a little bit of impact on why you've got these discounters and why they've kind of gained their momentum. But you need to. When I was at Palm, it was surprising to me because I came from doing accounting and financial analysis, but I knew how to listen. I'd been in music, so I'd been up on the stage and knew how to kind of improvise and go forward if I made a mistake. And so I did very well at funeral arrangements. I mean, really, after I got trained, and it was surprising to me that I could enter into doing funeral arrangements and managing a funeral home. I did embalm, and be better at and then be responsible for helping my arrangers who would get stuck or a family get upset. And this seems twisted, to me. Here's somebody who's been through the education that you're supposed to go through, and here I am with an accounting degree, and I'm doing better at funeral arrangements. So, there's something to be said, as we all probably can gather, that the skill set for sitting doing funeral arrangements and meeting with families, that listening, that putting the pen down, that forward thing that we learned yesterday is more the skill than probably what you learn in funeral directing school. I've been in funeral directing school, I know it's important, but I think that, some policies need to change personally.
Yeah, definitely. Your first job back in high school was working on the grounds at Pierce Brothers Valuations in Westlake Village, California. And a small factoid, I was the general manager at that park, not at that time, but you did stop by a couple times and then remember meeting you back then. So at Valuations, what do you remember most about working there, and what did you learn?
A couple things. Well, that's where I learned to drive. That's where I learned to drive a stick shift with Ruben, if you remember.
I taught my daughter in that same system.
See, there you go. In fact, I taught my wife to drive there when we were, because we've been together a long time.
Okay.
And that's where I met Jeff too, because he was the manager, I believe.
I think so, right?
This is like a small family.
I know, right?
But it was interesting, the Ruben, not many people, Bob would know Ruben, there's people here that know Ruben Ruiz. He was a great grounds foreman who ended up, Jeff stole him and took him to Hunters. But he was a great guy to work for, and a couple things I learned, I would he'd assign me a job, whatever it was, and it was, you're working on the grounds, and I finished that, and then he'd say, okay, here's the next thing. And I finished that, here's the next thing. I always thought, well, okay, eventually I'll be done, I can relax. And I realized there was just more work to be done. So, it's certainly to do the job, do it right. Know that the job is never done. But I remember just on a personal reflection being at the top of that hill where the Canaan family estate is, and kind of looking over, I can't remember the name of the road, Westlake Boulevard or something. And his family was mourning, and the casket was being lowered, and it was very sad. And then, it was a very busy street outside of Valuations, and like some car cut off another car, and people were honking. And I thought about it, and I'm like, life just goes on. People just, there's the stuff that goes on here, and everybody else is just doing what's going on in the world. It was just kind of sobering.
Yeah. Wow, what a memory that stuck with you.
Yeah. But the other thing was just how hard those grounds guys worked, and sometimes the way they were treated. I just never wanted. If I was ever going to be in that role, and I eventually was, I never wanted to let that happen to my guys. So.
Oh yeah, you got to take care of those guys and have lunch with them and do all those things. Absolutely. In your book, you start out by thanking some of your mentors, particularly Steve Tidwell, who's now Senior Vice President of Sales and Merchandising at SCI. What in particular did you learn from Steve? I don't know if you two are still close or.
In fact, it was Steve and Bob who's here as well. Bob's a long time family, might be one of the longest time family friends of our family, my father. And watching what those guys did for my father, and then moving on to start Keystone Group. In particular, I worked closely with Steve in financial analysis. And I remember it was one of those things where I had done the financial review, took it to him. I was ready to move on to the next thing. Again, it was like this task-driven thing, because that was the transition that I had to learn as far as it's the responsibility beyond that. And I took it to him. He had a lot of questions, and he just looked at me and said, "Look, if you're going to bring this back to me, and I'm going to ask these questions, I'll find somebody who I don't have to ask these questions to." So it was pretty sobering, and I realized to slow down, take my time, really dig into it, and go to the next level of responsibility rather than just what was tasked to me. I knew that if I could do that, that would get me into higher roles of responsibility.
Sure.
And we're still good, very close friends, and it's been a good mentor, and so I'm thankful for that. He's done well in his own right within SCI. Yep.
Yeah, he is brilliant, no doubt. As you think about, there's so many just incredible legends in this profession. Can you think of one or more that you really admire, and if so, who would that be and why?
There's so many. I think I would just generalize it and say that those that you meet them, John Carney comes to mind. This is, in my book, just people that it's just like they're calling. In our town here, Paul Messenger, I mean, it's like, you can tell just every day, it's just they love what they're in. No doubt we all love what we're doing, but it's just fascinating to me. It's just living and breathing it and what have you. So that, and then I hate to say it, but quite honestly, just I admire my father, and he's my father, but I've been very fortunate in how he's treated me as I came up to not micromanage me, but still, I mean, we've had our tough times, and I've deserved it. You kind of need that, and that's why coaching is a good thing for all of us, and I maintain that. So, but Dad and what he's done and his take on the world he came from in banking, and still be able to manage funeral homes and do all that stuff as well. So, it's inspirational.
That's great. Kind of thought I'd be on the list. You go on to say, you mentioned earlier your first real job was, doing some accounting for your dad. You mentioned that earlier, Prime Succession. And just to dig into, not that this is a therapy session, but as, working for your dad, you mentioned, didn't micromanage and gave you some levity, but was it hard, or was it harder do you think it was harder on you than maybe the other employees, or?
Yeah, I don't think those that worked with me. I mean, I never walked around like I was the owner's son. I just made sure I did more than the next person. Really,
right.
I tried, and I think I did a good job of that. And so, I think I wasn't looking for respect. I was just wanted to be one of the people there. I didn't want any special treatment, and it worked out well. So,
yeah.
And Dad never. He didn't share much with me, and he shouldn't, because I was just as far as no name and just roles go, I was just an accountant,
Right,
so.
right.
But I did a lot of different things. I was fortunate for that.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly the right attitude, I think. You want to do that. When your dad first started JCG, obviously you've owned it now for a long time. And this room is a representation. Did you ever think it would be as big as it is today?
No, I always like to dream big, so I guess I would have liked to thought that it would, but you don't know, and you bear down and you find the right people, which I think I have, and just work hard every day and never get complacent. So,
right.
Yeah. So we've expanded in our other services, and that's allowed for it, and they kind of cross-pollinate each other, and so.
And it seems like it's kind of exponentially grown over the last, 3-4 years.
Mm-hmm.
If you look back, Jake does a wonderful job each year, does a town hall, kind of look back at the company, remind everybody that's newer to the company where we've been. But it's really the last few years, is there something you can put your finger and point to that's really caused that? Or, how much do you think it was you now that you own it?
No, I think it's beyond me. And that's what I wanted. I wanted to be I can't remember how the phrase went, but I'd rather be walking around helping the people than telling them what to do, and I found very capable people to do that. So, and that's why we've grown. I mean, everything that's been put together with the summit, that was not anything of my doing. I supported it, and it's begrudgingly at times. There's Bob laughing. I knew I could find him. But just to make sure that we made it different than the other years, and they've accomplished that, which is great. So, yeah.
Well, it certainly is fun, and it's been incredible, a fun ride. As you think about your career, whether it's Johnson or any point, what's a proud moment, one of your proudest moments that you think back on?
Interestingly enough, I would say, I'm proud every day when I walk in and see what I see going on. I mean, it's just incredible, and that part, I guess it was in my vision, but I just didn't know what it would look like or feel like, to see everything that goes on around the office without me being involved, right? But interestingly, I would say just from a task, it was a large task I had no idea how to accomplish when I was at Palm, of all places. They had a really bad irrigation problem. It's funny that I would say this is one of the better accomplishments, but if you're in the desert and it's not irrigating grass, it's dying.
Right.
It's dying, and it takes a long time to grow. And so that Eastern Warm Springs location, I learned a lot about hydrolysis, I guess if that's the word, irrigation, but we had to figure out how to get mainline clock, like clocks, I'm not mainline, like control clocks to working in from a controller that was like 200 yards away in the concrete, whatever, and we'd get up at 3 in the morning and we worked on it for 2 months. I mean, that was the only thing they wanted me to accomplish because nobody had ever been able to fix it before. And they were just doing manual and watering and whatever. And we figured out, I built a big Excel spreadsheet, which they may still use. We had to figure out the GPMs per line and the main line flow and when that turned on. And in Las Vegas, there's penalties for irrigating afternoon. And we were recycling off a lake, and that came off of the roads that went back in the lake. And we couldn't drain, you could drain the lake literally if you didn't irrigate, right? So we had to time all that. And we got it figured out. Everything started looking great, and I was a hero. So that was fun, yeah. And I got my guy, you know, it really helped me like gain trust with my guys because I was, you know, I learned how to do funeral directing and manage funeral homes, but I didn't know irrigation, so I went to irrigation classes, and it was fun actually.
Wow.
So yeah,
Wow.
that was fun to do.
Yeah, you definitely gained respect to the guys coming out early.
Well, and because it made it look bad, you know, the grass isn't growing, and Kelly, you know, knows some of this. And we fixed it, especially even in Kelly's location in Northwest. I mean, we were irrigating at the time out of a water tanker, and that thing would drain out, and so,
Wow.
Yeah, it was fun.
That's great. That's great. I've got a broken line at home. I might ask you about later. What's been your biggest, as you think back to your career, we probably all have something sometimes, a big career regret or mistake or something, you're like, you know, something that comes to mind?
Yeah, I think what I'm guilty of is I'm tenacious. I mean, I'm very competitive, and that's good, but it's also bad, meaning that you don't know when to quit, you know, sometimes. And so, you know, I think a big thing for me lately is TAM, total addressable market. You know, when you start something, what is addressable market? What's your competition like? What's your buyer persona? What's the total customers out there? Who are you not going to get? Who are you going to get? And really drill that down and then come up with a, you know, kind of work backwards and then start working forwards. And for me, it's like, all right, let's just do this. Let's do that. And we'll figure it out and we'll put more time in and that'll be the answer. And it has worked, but, you know, at a great cost. And, you know, so I think planning better and then knowing when to give up, you know, fail fast is what they say, you know, failing faster in those things. So, yeah.
Okay. In your book, you speak in some detail how some owners will keep their key players kind of in the dark, right? They're protective, which is kind of, you know, pretty contrary to today's, you know, modern day, how do you develop your team and your leaders. You know, how do you think owners, you know, if you could give them advice, you know, how can they position employees to take over an organization, to lift the burden off themselves, and without like giving up all the secret sauce, right? So that they could ultimately leave before you transfer ownership and go compete against you. What are your thoughts on that?
There's no exact answer, but certainly, you know, first find the right people, whether it's your own, you know, your own family member or a key person. I think for hunters, it was hiring Jeff. For me, it was hiring Kelly. You know, and take care of them. Make sure they're well paid. I know Kelly is. And
in fact, I think that's a direct quote from the book.
Right, I think it's correct.
I circled it. You know,
but I mean, you know what? Really, I mean, especially in today's market. I mean, damn it. I mean, hire good people and pay them well. Right. Seriously. Right. And then help them, and in a way, get out of their way, but be a good resource to them. And so that what you should be doing is being out in the market. You know, if you consider like what you'd pay yourself, what you'd be paid as an owner, you know, based on your dividends at the end of the year on an hourly basis, I bet it's a lot of money.
Right.
You know,
right.
And is that a high-paid person that you've just determined, you being yourself, should they be, you know, reviewing death certificates, running death certificates? You know, should they be doing that kind of stuff? Right. You know, it's not that it's not beyond you. Like, yeah, you should help out when you can, but that person probably should be out in the community, you know, forging relationships and doing what probably caused most of their, you know, way back in the day, their funeral homes to grow as they did, you know. Right. Just kind of these pillars of the community. So,
yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and that point in the book is so strong, right? I mean, everything that we want as owners is to be servant leaders, but the best use of your time. You know, does it make a lot of sense for me to do this for 3 hours when
right.
I could develop someone to do that? I mean, yeah, absolutely. You noted in the book interest rates are so low. I think they just dropped yesterday. You know, there's those in the investment community, and I've fielded calls like this before. They're just really happy and excited to jump into the funeral business because they know they can get a quick, immediate return from day one. Do do you see that continuing would be my first part of the question. And the second part would be is as at some point interest rates will go up, do you think that will change kind of which players want to get into the market and stay long term?
Yeah, there's a lot of money out there for those that have looked for it. I mean, there's a lot of money, they don't know where to put it necessarily, so it's not hard if you know where to look to find people that want to invest. So that's not the difficulty. The difficulty is they want to give you a lot of money. And while that seems exciting, you also need to figure out how to spend that and buy businesses at a fast pace. And there's a lot of people buying businesses right now. So it can be difficult. So I think the money's out there, you can get it. What you have to determine is whether or not you can scale it as quick as they're going to want a return on, which is typically in 5 years. And recently I've run investment models to kind of learn more of that process, and there's a real actuarial reason why it's a 5-year return. And then it's just kind of the way, because the longer it goes, then the return becomes less, so they kind of get in, get out, whatever. That's why you see a lot of that, or that they go public. So I think, certainly as interest rates stay low, the money is cheaper, and so if the debt's less and the cash flow is the same, then you can pay more. Right. And that's what we've seen, for premium businesses, so. And I think that will, I don't know, it's hard to say. I wish I could say, because I would probably be determining when the recession's going to hit, but I would say, it seems like for at least the next couple of years, it looks pretty good. I don't know.
Right. You never know. Right. In your book, another area you talk a lot about is pre-need, and you express your level of dismay at times, that many firms don't really, they don't have a full-time counselor, they don't actively manage and drive pre-need sales. Why do you think that some firms really just don't see that as a benefit?
Well, it's not at the core what we do, right, or the way that they do. It's taking care of families one at a time as they come in. But the thing is, we're faced with new challenges that we were faced with before. We got the internet, technology, discounters, people who want more transparency, pricing and what you do, and they want options. They're okay with shopping around. There's less loyalty. And when I sit in groups with my EO entrepreneur network here in Arizona, most of those conversations are how are we growing, what are we doing to grow, and they're not really talking about what their best practices are and sharing that with each other, which we tend to do a lot. And when there's value to that, but to me, I think it'd be interesting to have more of the conversations about how we're growing. And one way is you go out and define that business before they come in, and SCI is doing a pretty good job. The interesting thing is, and there's, then there's the other side of that. But when we were selling SCI businesses that were just really failing, the interesting part was, that we could see what was adding and what was pre-need turn adding. The pre-need turn adding was studying in these businesses that clearly had customer service issues, whatever. The adding was falling, but the customers felt like they needed to go there. So there is some rationale, for pre-need sales and going out and getting those customers, whatever. I think there's accountability to it. But anybody that you can talk to that's just such a success in this world is, they're great marketing people, they're great salespeople, and so that's got to be a part of it if you plan on at least maintaining your revenue as your under sale drops.
Right.
Which
with the mix shift and everything. How do you think a large or a small pre-need backlog impacts the value of the business? We get somebody calls Johnson next week, thinking about selling it or selling my son, or I just want a valuation done to restructure my debt or whatever. Do you think that a lot of pre-need backlog or less, does that impact really valuations much? Or?
Yeah, it's in the cash flow is the pre-need turn at need revenue that falls to the bottom line. So there is a portion of EBITDA attributed to the pre-need turn at need. But I think the real issue would be like when I bought Menke from my father, on top of dealing with my father to buy it, was let's say Menke had no pre-need book of business. You have SCI in that market, so I would have just had to speculate that we were going to be headed for a problem in the future, but they did do pre-need. And so that's more reassuring. So what I think it does is more provides the confidence that there's business, that somebody's been at least somewhat out in the market, right in pre-need. The bigger book of business, the more business that's coming in, but you're not buying the pre-need dollar for dollar, but you certainly are as it comes in, and it's a nice warm blanket to know that somebody's been active in the market.
Okay, good perspective. Another topic in the book you touch on is how some of the newer entrants, maybe millennials or whatnot, they're coming into this profession, but they have a different opinion about work-life balance, right? Where some of the older generations, we know that, work a ton, Do you think these newer folks coming in need to change their mindset, or do you think the older generation can kind of learn from that?
Yeah, I think the older generation learned from it. It was mentioned, but I think the thing that we've all learned and dealt with millennials, and there's some that are right over here. I can't, you guys, sorry, you always call yourself millennials. But they're extremely loyal to their interest in what they're interested in doing. And so when they're doing what they like to do, I mean, they put a lot of dedication and hard work towards it. And I think the thing that's interesting is that whether it's millennials or the next generation, just because they want more freedom, that doesn't mean they're just going to be necessarily lazy. I think what you'll find is they'll just find ways to figure it out. They're going to outsource everything, right?
Sure.
And I think you start seeing that where there's more specialization of tasks and things going on out in the world, and that's going to be their way to solve the problem and find the time they want. And what a nice idea, quite honestly. Right. Figure out how to accomplish what we're accomplishing right now, but to segment that out to people that are better at it, and I can have a little more time and freedom.
Right.
I'm sure that they'll figure that out. They're probably already figured it out.
Yeah, for sure. You note in the first step in controlling your future is to get your business, get a valuation. We talked a little bit about valuations already. If you had to guess, what percentage of firms out there do you think are getting valuations, and if they aren't doing it, what do you think is preventing them? And talk to us a little bit about why you can get a valuation. If I'm not going to sell, why even call you for that?
Not many are doing it. There's some. The proactive ones will, but it's still a low percentage. I think I get a valuation at John's Consulting probably every 5 years. I just got this second one done. And it's just good to kind of know where you're at, where you're headed, what's all this hard work been doing for you, like what do you because it is your most valuable investment, whatever it is, business or a consulting company or if you're a vendor. And so doing that, it's kind of like doing the strategic plan for your business. It's a moment to pause from the daily things going on and look at how you're setting things for the future and where you put yourself, because it's Dad always uses the thing, it's like the Alice in Wonderland quote about I don't even know, this is kind of a generational thing. The Cheshire Cat, and Alice goes up to the crossroads and says, he says, where are you going? She says, I don't know where I want to go. He says, well, it really doesn't matter then. Dad uses that as valuation things. You got to have, know where your road is and where you want to go, and getting the valuation done is just one piece of it. It's important to do, because someday you would think that you want to retire. I think a lot of us kind of feel like, I think I heard it in the valuation, or in the discussion, but we're living forever, or it's not going to happen to me. But the reality is, we should know better than anybody. We're going to die one day, or we certainly would like to retire. Have you determined what that date is at some level, and then work backwards? And do you like the answer?
Right.
And evaluation is a piece of that.
Yeah. What percent of firms would you say are pretty good at doing that every 3 to 5 years? Is it?
It's not. I'd say less than a third, probably.
Wow.
Maybe a third. It just they get busy in their day and they move on. And the ones that have so clients where we've got we're doing especially if we're doing their accounting and the other things, we've got the information, so getting valuation done is pretty quick, and so there's usually a bigger valuation term, something like that, or somebody who's getting accounting done from our professional kind of specific accounting firm. I bet there's more valuations getting done there because they're easier to get done. It's not much as a hassle.
Right. Right. Gotcha. In a recent JCG, we do our weekly customer service huddles. You went on to tell a story about your favorite underwear brand. Oh, sorry. That was a question. He told me to cut it. He told me to cut that one. I apologize.
That was a good one.
Yeah, inspiring. So you get a valuation. So the $64,000 question is, what are multiples today, and what do you think multiples are going to do with interest rates being low? And it's kind of would you call it a seller's market right now? There's a lot of people out there, right?
It's definitely a seller's market. It feels like back in the day when I was working with Bob and his team back in the mid-90s, it's kind of like that right now. It feels like. And then in 2000, everything went to hell or whatever. But yeah, it's definitely, there's a lot of buyers. They're paying good money for businesses they want. I think they're a little more selective than they used to be. So the multiples have changed and they haven't changed. Like, so they're pretty much the same for firms that maybe there's a little more work that needs to be done, or that, they weren't much prepared to sell, but they had to were prepared, they're big, the nice firms, the big ones, the franchise name of the market, they're selling for more money than they used to. Yeah, good money, yeah.
And if you're an owner, a lot of people, I think, just kind of assume that they'll just feel it when it's the right time to sell. Do you think that's the right approach, the right attitude, or?
Yes and no. I think you should still do the preparation and get the valuation done, determining when it is that you would like to retire and what you want to do after retirement is just as important, and what is that money that you feel like you need. But after you've done all that, then it is a feel, because we've certainly sold businesses where the owner wasn't necessarily ready, but they got the right offer and said, I guess I should sell. And they did, and they've been happy about it.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. I guess if you're an owner today and you think you've got 5 years or less left in your run, with interest rates and all that you just got done this home.
Kind of makes you wonder.
It makes you wonder if should we do the valuation and think about it maybe a couple years sooner than, because like you said, the recession's going to come. It just none of us knows when. Well, Jake, it's been a pleasure. Any final thoughts about the book, or?
Well, we skipped the underwear part. That was
yeah, we did skip the underwear part. I'm so sorry I read that.
Yeah. The book, I really created the book again to give back to the profession. There's the audio version, giving it to the schools, but if there's ever other questions or things, I'm happy to answer them. I really wanted it to be something that people use as a resource. I think it's really invaluable for the next generation to kind of give them a perspective on all the things I learned and get it all in a quicker time frame so they can move on with that experience and do better than I did. Right. That's the whole point.
Excellent. Mm-hmm. Well, good. Well, thank you, my friend. Enjoy your flight.
Yeah, thank you.